Welcome, everybody, to our Cold Climate Food Production webinar series. My name is Amaya Ducha, and I'll be today's webinar's moderator. Today, we'll be discussing navigating H-2A with Emily Klingbeil and Laura Herrygers. Emily grew up on a dairy farm in mid-Michigan and has a background in agricultural education, including 13 years as a high school ag teacher and FFA advisor. She now helps farmers navigate the H-2A Guestworker Program as an account manager. And Laura comes from a 6th-generation apple, cherry, and asparagus farm and has worked in agricultural outreach with Michigan Farm Bureau. She's now a marketing specialist and an account manager with Great Lakes Ag Labor Service. So we're very excited to have them both today with us, and we'll please join me to welcoming Emily and Laura. I'm gonna let them take over and start this webinar. I will just do like a little bit of a housekeeping, just remind you to stay muted and with your cameras off. And if you have any questions, you can type them in the Q&A or in the chat box, and then we will answer all the questions at the end of the presentation. All right.
All right, thank you so much for joining us to talk about H-2A. And again, if you have questions, throw them in the chat, reach out to us as well, and we're happy to answer them. Laura and I are here to give you a big picture of H-2A. I know we don't have all day to talk about it, so I'm sure there will be questions at the end, but don't hesitate to holler as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we can get started, and hopefully that works. So what we're going to do, our objective is to, like I said, give you a big picture about H-2A, and then also talk a little bit about what our company does specifically and how to get started and how we can help you through the program, and a little bit about what's going on the national level regarding H-2A as well. So with that, Laura's going to hop in and give you a little intro about the H-2A program as a whole.
Thank you, Emily. So for those that aren't aware, H-2A is a work visa program. So it's a legal way to bring seasonal workforce onto your farm, and then they work on the H-2A work visa. H-2A is specifically set for agriculture. So it's in order to qualify, the job tasks have to be primary agriculture job tasks, and they also have to be seasonal job tasks. So that includes pruning, hand harvesting, planting, all of those types of job tasks that are tied to the season. It is a complicated filing. There's a lot of steps. You file with the state, you file with Department of Labor, and you also file with Homeland Security. So that's kind of what we do as Great Lakes Ag. We take on that filing responsibility, take that off the growers' shoulders. The beneficial part of H-2A that we're very lucky about is that it's an uncapped program. So what that means is there's not a limit to how many workers either a farm can ask for or the whole United States can ask for. Which some other work visa programs are not as lucky. Some of those are capped. H-2A is uncapped, which has been very beneficial for us. And then you also are required to recruit domestically when you file H-2A work visas. So if you are filing the H-2A program, under the H-2A program, you still have to make sure that you're available to the domestic workforce if there is a domestic workforce out there. So you're still going to give precedence to the domestic workforce. There's different types of application models that you can file for depending on what your farm best fits. Our most common application model is the fixed site. So it's one grower. They have job tasks that they want to get completed on their farm, and then we file the paperwork for that grower, and they solely hire the H-2A workers. There's different models as well, but I would say that our one grower fixed site is the most common. You could also file as a farm labor contractor. a joint employer or an association. An association is starting to get a little bit more popular, whereas it's a group of multiple growers and they can share the workers between themselves on one association model. Joint employers aren't as common anymore due to Department of Labor regulations on how they view a joint employer. And then farm labor contractors has a little bit more red tape to it. You have to have more licenses, so those are a little less common, but can be beneficial if that's something you're looking for. One of the there's multiple requirements under the H-2A program. The top ones that we want to make sure that our employers are aware of is the adverse effect wage rate. So that is the wage that you have to pay your H-2A workers, and that is set by Department of Labor. So this year in the state of Wisconsin, it's $18.15 an hour. It actually went down a little bit. Last year was $18.50, and this year is $18.15. So we got just a tiny bit lucky that our adverse effect wage rate went down for the 2025 season. You also have to provide free housing. You have to provide transportation to and from the housing and the work site each day, as well as going to get groceries once a week. The employer is responsible for paying transportation from the country of origin to your farm. So if you're crossing workers from Mexico, you're paying for that bus ticket to get to Wisconsin from Mexico. And then at the end of the season, you're paying that bus ticket again for them to return home. So there's no charges to the workers on that. One of the other items is the 75% guarantee. So you have to guarantee that the workers are going to work 75% of the hours that you had originally put in your contract at the time of filing. We can go through all of these into much more depth at the end if anybody has specific questions on them. This is just kind of a brief overview so that you're aware of what the H-2A program is. And then you also have to be open to hiring domestic applicants through the half-life of your contract. So the first 50% of your contract, you are hiring domestic applicants as long as they meet the requirements. This is just an easy chart for you to see the growth in H-2A. It has really increased throughout the years. The last data that we have from Department of Labor is 2022 on the chart, I should say. And then if you look, it's my right, to my right, there's the Wisconsin H-2A growth. So in 2024, Wisconsin was certified 1,787 H-2A visas. And then this is, again, just a little snapshot of what you can see. These are the top states. So Florida's almost always number one. I don't think anyone's beat Florida yet. Florida, Georgia, California, Washington are really the top ones.
All right, and then go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, Emily.
I was like, just looking at Wisconsin, the thing to remember about Wisconsin is last year there were 175 applications that were submitted and certified by the Department of Labor, and most of them are those individual employers, like we talked about as well. What do H-2A workers do in Wisconsin? That for the most part, the biggest chunk of H-2A workers that we have fall under that general farm worker laborer category. So again, they're working in crops or working in specialty crops, hand harvest, there's a variety of jobs fit under that general farm worker category. We also see quite a few workers come in under an ag equipment operator job title. Again, those are folks that are maybe operating bigger machinery, working in row crops. I know in Wisconsin, there are some H-2A workers for coming in to work for the co-ops, hire some H-2A workers to come in again, they're hauling crops and doing kind of big machinery work. For our dairy farming friends, I know this is apples and grapes, but for our dairy farming friends, H-2A workers don't qualify to be milkers, to milk cows, because that's a year-round job and not seasonal. But we do have some dairy farms that are bringing in these ag equipment operators to haul manure and again do the seasonal jobs that do exist on a dairy farm as well. Some of the others, this is just another example of the wide range of work that H-2A folks are doing in Wisconsin. Again, they cover a lot of ground, and are involved in all types of agriculture. But the seasonal temporary that Laura mentioned before, that's really the key to knowing if that task qualifies under the H-2A program. As far as range of applications, et cetera, it's really a misconception sometimes. Like, oh, I'm not one of the big guys. Like, I don't need 100 workers. I don't really fit in the H-2A program, and really that's a myth. As far as the applications that were submitted in Wisconsin last year, they ranged in number from 1 worker to over 100 workers. And we see that a lot. I mean, I have a client that has almost 200 workers, and I have a client that has 1 worker. And it really just depends. And really, there is no big or small limit to how many people you can bring in on your worker contract. It really just depends on what you need. And so it's really, again, you can apply for as many or as few as you want as far as workers, depending on your need. And like 83% of the Wisconsin applications last year were for 10 workers or less. So, the difference, you think about your operations and the difference that, even an extra 2 folks, the hands of extra two workers, 2, 3, 4 workers could have on your season, and alleviating burden, especially towards the end of the season, could be huge. I had one client that says that, they're normally working well into November as far as like the whole wrap up, putting things away, getting things cleaned up from the season. And the first year that they had H-2A workers, that was all done. Like those workers were able to get that whole task done, that they weren't still doing that, in the winter time as well. So it was a huge blessing for them. As far as Wisconsin goes and getting H-2A workers or stepping into the H-2A process, the big hurdle or the big obstacle oftentimes is that housing component. Because if you are an individual employer, you do have to provide housing. And so a lot of times some people, they want to get started in the H-2A program, but it takes them a little while to figure out that housing option. It doesn't have to be owned by you. It just you could rent something. In some cases, you even can use a motel. There's a couple extra steps you have to do, but that's totally possible. And so the first thing would be to get your housing in order as you're starting to think about using H-2A. The Department of Workforce Development is a great resource for that. You actually will go online and submit an application with them. You have to get certified as a migrant labor camp if you've got over 2 workers that you're bringing in, and there's a list of requirements and a list of things to submit. And then they will actually come out and inspect your housing. And certify your labor camp. So that's why we always say it's a good idea to at least start the process 4 months before you want your workers to show up, because that'll give, again, this process time, the Department of Workforce Development time to get out and inspect your housing, et cetera, because the Department of Labor is not going to certify your job until they've confirmed with the state of Wisconsin that your housing has been inspected and approved. So that's kind of the big first step as far as entering in. And again, this is just a copy from the website. This team of people is who does H-2A in Wisconsin. They're an office. There's a couple outreach specialists. There's 2 labor inspectors that cover the whole state of Wisconsin that will come out to your farm, like I said, and inspect your housing. And then the foreign labor certification coordinator is the one that approves and looks over all the applications as they're submitted and approves them, or bounces them back for questions and clarifications, et cetera. So this is your team of folks that works with and approves your H-2A applications on the state level. And again, we just really encourage, if you're thinking about H-2A, the really so important to plan ahead. For us, our process, which Laura's going to talk about in a little bit, we do require a management review, which she'll explain in a little bit. But again, 100 days, 120 days, as soon as you can, to start that process of getting on board with whoever you're using to organize your labor, whether it's us or a farm labor contractor, and then also time to get your housing done. And because there's certain timeframes that it takes, to go through all those different agencies and the complexity of the application, all of that takes time to move through the process in order to get approval so that you can get your workers here on time. So if you need workers next week, I can't help you do that, but we can get them as soon as possible, and all that. It does take a little planning on the front end as well. And then once your job order or your work order is all submitted, it actually gets automatically put on the seasonaljobs.gov website. And this is just kind of an example of what it looks like as it's posted. And so your job posting gets posted out there again for those domestic applicants potentially that would come and inquire about the job. And we really honestly don't have a lot of domestic applicants, but a lot of this is, again, fulfilling the requirement the Department of Labor has to make sure that domestic folks are getting the first chance at those jobs. Just a couple kind of policy things. H-2A is not perfect, but it's what we have, right? And so there are some things kind of at play just so that you know and are aware of that we're hoping to change and improve this program so that it makes it easier for you all to navigate as employers and the process, less complicated and just have more access to be able to do the work on your farms that you need to do. And so there's still some question marks as far as what the new Congress and administration, how things are going to play out regarding a bunch of regulation that was on its way to being active last year, depending on what's going to happen, if that's going to be continue moving forward. Laura mentioned the adverse effect wage rate, which is the how much you have to pay your workers, and that's not something that's like arbitrary. The Department of Labor actually will tell you, depending on what region of the country you're in, how much you have to pay. And here's kind of the map. Here's the map from 2024, and I'm going to skip ahead to 2025, and you can see that. Again, for us in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, we're at that 1815. We were fortunate to have a lower number, and you're looking at all these other states, and they did not fare so well as far as the wage that Department of Labor said. Look at our friends to the south are paying $19.57 an hour, and when you combine the housing costs and the transportation costs, it can end up to be closer to $30 an hour in actual cost for an H-2A worker. And so it's not cheap by any means, but at the same time, necessary and also like a secure workforce. So you know that those folks are going to be there to help you and to provide the labor when you need, when your crop is ready to be handled, et cetera. So there's a lot of politics going around as far as the adverse effect wage rate because it keeps climbing. Its growth is not sustainable. And I mean, farmers are really worried about their ability to continue to pay that rate, especially since how that number is derived. There's lots of flaws in that. It comes from the Farm Labor Survey that comes out every year, and which was never intended to be used to determine this AWR rate. And so there's lots of issues with that. Just so you know, something that is happening now, Representative Molinar from Michigan actually just reintroduced in February a bill that he had tried to get through last year. It's called in the Supporting Farm Operations Act. And the big point of that is they're trying to figure out and trying to get a pause on that AWR, on that pay rate that folks have to pay, just to like pause it, to keep it from increasing till they can figure out a better way to come up with what that rate is. And so that's some legislation that was just introduced in February. We would love some Wisconsin legislators to hop on that bill and be supportive of that bill as well. But that's what's kind of going on. And there's some other places. There's some language in the Farm Bill to try to update the Farm Labor Survey, and then some language in some House Appropriations activity, again, to try to get a pause on that AWR. So Michigan Farm Bureau, American Farm Bureau are working really hard to try to address that AWR issue, which is kind of the hot topic as far as H-2A goes as well. And then just, again, a conversation that just to kind of add on, I'm not getting on my soapbox or anything, but I'll try to get off it quick. But as we're talking about, farm labor, it often gets lumped into the conversation of immigration. And we really need to make sure that we're separating that out, right? Because we're not talking about immigration. This visa is a temporary non-immigrant visa. And so when it gets lumped into immigration, it gets confusing and gets gray, and we don't want to muddy the water as far as what the labor, getting the labor that we need. So we're trying to separate out those two things. It's a workforce issue, labor issue, not necessarily an immigration issue. And then, like as you're talking about folks, talking to folks in the community and the dialogue that we're all using, just, we're reminding people that food security is national security. And so we need to be able to afford to grow the food here, grow as much food as we can here versus importing it from all over where we aren't in control of the process that it's being grown or the things that are getting put on it, et cetera. And so we want to make sure that we can do everything we can to protect our food supply and continue to make sure that we can grow fresh food here as well. And our H-2A workforce, again, it's not perfect. It needs some fixing, needs some modernization to the program, but it's stable, it's reliable, and it's legal. And we're going to use it to the best we can to do the best we can to get labor and get the labor that we need. Laura's going to jump in and just kind of tell you guys a little bit about us and kind of our program and how we work in the H-2A arena.
So Great Lakes Ag, we were founded by Michigan Farm Bureau. The Michigan Farm Bureau Board of Directors sat down back in 2014, I believe, and said, okay, we need to start getting involved in the H-2A program. How are we going to figure this out for our members? And so they said, let's put Farm Bureau staff on it, essentially. And it's morphed into this company that we have now built. And so we are still a part of the Michigan Farm Bureau, and we're partnering with other state farm bureaus to help farms navigate H-2A. So this is our 11th season, I believe. So we've done it for 11 years now. We've learned a ton, and the whole team, most of our team is bilingual, and we're able to be kind of a full service agency for farms. We do not act as a farm labor contractor, so we file the paperwork for you for the farms, and then we can also handle the recruiting side of things. So if you have specific people from Mexico, South Africa, Jamaica, whatever country that you're looking at, we can handle that recruitment side. And then they become your employees. So they're on your payroll and they're your employees at the end of the day. And I believe it was last year, we had turned into the largest H-2A agency in Michigan. So this year we're freshly available to Wisconsin Farm Bureau. This is our first year that we have been able to file in Wisconsin. Emily has filed paperwork through the state of Wisconsin, and we have officially crossed workers, H-2A workers, into the state of Wisconsin now. So we're a new member benefit for Wisconsin Farm Bureau members. There's a few different ways. So we kind of offer like a la carte services. So we could handle just the application filing, or we could also take on the worker recruitment and the worker scheduling. And then also, if you would like us to take on the virtual, we can do virtual bilingual worker orientation, where we're able to kind of pre-fill worker packets. So hiring documents, I-9s, W-4s, Social Security applications, housing checklists, you name it. We kind of have all of the documents already set up so that when the workers are here, we can sit down with them and go over everything with them. We're also always going to be available for education and compliance questions. So when you work with Great Lakes Ag, you're assigned an account manager, and any question that comes up throughout the year, just give us a call and we can help you through that compliance, the compliance standpoint, so that when Department of Labor shows up for an audit, you guys are going to be checking off all of the boxes being crystal clean. One of the things that we also do is we partner with Varnum Law, and they have built, with our help, a Varnum compliance guide. So it's an online subscription that has all of the H-2A regulations included in it, so that you can go through and say, hey, I'm not sure about what are the regulations on the payroll section. And so we have kind of an easy to read list. I don't know if you've ever read Department of Labor regulations, but they put you to sleep. So this way, it's a kind of more of a checklist, easy way to read what are your requirements as the employer to make sure that you're meeting payroll regulations, housing regulations, transportation regulations, all of that kind of stuff. And then we just have a few customer quotes in here. We have this one from Saginaw, Michigan, and then Emily, if you want to skip forward, Oh, sorry, it's at the very end of the slideshow, so never mind. I forgot. There's another one in here too. Um, but yeah, we've been slowly growing, and we really enjoy all of the customers that we have worked with so far.
Just to kind of give overview as we finish off, and and if there's questions, please let us know. But again, to the H-2A program, key points: temporary, seasonal, non-immigrant visa. So the work that we're doing, that those folks are doing, really has to be able to be tied to a season throughout Wisconsin, which for us in agriculture in Wisconsin, that's easy. The winter kind of puts the kibosh on a lot of things potentially going on your farms to give us a seasonal component. It's a complicated application process. As you saw, it's got to go through various different government agencies with different requirements and paperwork and applications required along the way. It's really, really important that you use a trusted agent, which we would be an agent or a farm labor contractor. If you're going to go that route, it's so important because there are so many regulations and rules to follow that you want to make sure that who's ever helping you set up your H-2A workers knows what they're doing. They're reliable. Have good references, et cetera, because ultimately when Department of Labor comes to do an audit, potentially like you're on the hook, no matter, depending on how those workers got there and what's happening, you want to make sure that you have all the information and are doing things correctly to avoid some penalties and issues in the event of an audit. There's lots of employer requirements, housing being the first hurdle. And then again, just importance of planning ahead to make sure that you have time to get your housing certified and then also have time for your application to go through those various agencies as it moves its way through approval, and those visas end up getting approved as well. And again, just important to keep records, documentation, audit files, et cetera. Just as in anything, records are important, and you want to make sure that you've got everything saved in the event that an audit does happen. So audits don't happen very often, but they do happen. And we've definitely seen since right after COVID, there was kind of a lull. Folks weren't, Department of Labor wasn't getting out very much, but that has since ramped back up, at least what we've been seeing in Michigan last year. And so we expect that to continue as well. If you would like to learn more about us or have more questions, et cetera, this is a QR code you're welcome to follow. There's a little form that just has you give us your information and we can follow up, or you're welcome to drop your information in the chat, or Josie and the ladies there have our email and all our contact information as well. So we're more than happy to, if you think of something later, to follow up with you as well. Is there I guess now we can open it for questions. I don't know I haven't been looking at the chat. If there's questions in the chat or if folks want to just hop in, we are happy to answer anything you guys have.
That was great. Thank you so much. That's really valuable information. I see that in the chat. There's one question, and I can read it to you. The question says, does Great Lakes Ag have an option to advise the process? Last year, I applied on my own, but my visa request was returned due to one section of the I-129. With the timing, any returns make it such the workers cannot arrive on time. I really just need someone to quality check the forms and help with translation of the contract.
I can answer that one. So we do not typically advise on H-2A, but we do offer an a la carte service program. So if you want to review it, and then you can choose the options that make sense to you. Typically we handle all of the filing and not just handling the I-129 or just handling the 790. There's different forms, different form names. But typically we can take on we provide a la carte service, so you can choose what you want us to take over.
Perfect. I see that a follow-up question is that, do you have a fee schedule?
Yes, we do. We can, if you want to put in your email, I can send it out to you.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions for Emily and Laura? You can just unmute yourself if you want to ask it, or you can type it on the chat. Well, it doesn't look like anybody else has any questions. I posted the link on the chat of where the recording of this webinar is going to be, and we're going to be sharing it because there's a lot of really great information here. And I know that, you know, a lot more people have been asking about this information. So we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel for people to review it. I just really want to thank Emily and Laura for being willing to give this webinar and for their time and effort in putting together the presentation and sharing with us all this information. This is great. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing the information.
You're welcome. And like I said, please don't hesitate to reach out. Like we care about farmers, and we know that labor is tricky and hard, and we want to be able to help you figure that out. And for some of you, you know, using our services may make sense. For others of you, maybe using a farm labor contractor might make sense. And we'll tell you, you know, like well, you know, based on what your situation is, we want to get you in the right spot and on the right track to getting the labor that you need. So like I said, don't hesitate to reach out. We love to talk to folks and hear about your farms and help get you the labor that you need.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for attending.